All right, we're on. Tommy, thanks for being here.
How you going, man? What's happening?
Great to see you, man. We actually went to the same primary school together.
Yeah. All the way back in the day, man.
Back in the day, it's been crazy seeing you kind of develop into, a huge kind of worldwide sensation of a DJ now. And it's been awesome to see you kind of evolve over that time, even if only from afar.
Yeah, it's been a great journey, man. And running into every now and again, man, it's always like such a shock, because we've both changed so much. We've grown so much as well. Like it's always, really cool to catch up as well, man. But thanks for having me on as well. It's a pleasure to be on the show. And yeah.
Why is everyone a DJ now? What's this DJ fad?
Well, this is the kind of thing that I find very weird, because it isn't in that sense a DJ fad. Like everyone said, there's so much access to DJ gear. There's so much access to like all that equipment and stuff, and I think everyone just wants a piece of the action. They want the entertainment side of it. They want to be involved with it. They want fans. They want people who follow them and like appreciate what they do and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's funny because it is kind of a DJ fad in my opinion. You've got people like the producers who are making the music and stuff like that. And that's a very complicated thing to do. So I think people, they get into the DJ side of things because they want to connect with the music more, but they don't really have like the total amount of professional skills to kind of put the productions together and stuff like that. And, I think it's just generally, there's so much access to being able to do it. It's always easy to get a club set, you go down to Greenwood Thursdays, get a club set, and get in the action, and have fun with your friends and all that kind of thing. Like it's a fun thing to do. And I think, everyone can get involved as well.
Do you think there's a status, or that status plays a role in this kind of growth? That it's seen as a cool thing?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because back when I started DJing, 5 or 6 years ago, you were the DJ. And there wasn't a lot of people who were really doing it for that reason, for the whole status thing. It was like you were interested in music for the sake of being interested in the music, and you were producing, you were doing everything. But now, I see it. Yeah, now people are there for that. We call it in the industry the clout, and it's like the girls and the money and whatever like that. But at the same time, I think it really is kind of that sort of thing indeed. So
apparently Paris Hilton was a DJ at Tomorrowland.
Unfortunately, once it gets to that level, you unfortunately you can kind of pay to play. I like to look at it, and it sucks, but at the same time, it does. How can I explain it? It's sort of, it promotes that whole brand, and it expands the brand of Tomorrowland and stuff like that, having Paris Hilton on as well. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of her DJ sets personally, I'm sure a lot of people have probably gone, oh, I didn't even know what this music festival was or whatever. But in saying that, there are also thousands of other amazing DJs there. So yeah,
that's true. It still brings attention nonetheless, so it potentially starts positive.
Yeah, of course, definitely. I would really like to see her produce a track herself, but I'm not sure if that'll happen anytime soon. Really.
Tell me, what's the difference? Because I feel like people get this confused, and I did up until recently. What's the difference between a DJ and a music producer, and which one are you?
So, technically I'm both, because I've always been a music producer. So I'm someone who basically makes their own music, writes music, makes lyrics, all that kind of thing, just a typical musician. But I also produce music for other artists. So if artists come to me with a particular sound that they want to achieve, they want to record some stuff, they want to work in a studio, then I'm the kind of guy that they approach to connect all the dots, to master the music, to mix the music. And in saying mastering and mixing, it's like getting the volume leveling right, producing the music, writing the riffs and the chords. And most of the time, DJs, realistically, DJs are performers, and producers are usually the people behind the scenes. But I do both. I do both things to make an income. So I'm DJing to get my name out there, 2, make a bit of money in the week, and then also showcase my productions at the same time and showcase productions that I'm working with other people. But yeah, there is a big difference, and I think a lot of people, they don't really understand the difference. You know, they go, "Oh, it's the DJ," but you know, a lot of people have said that to me, but they don't really understand like how many hours and how many people you've worked with. And you know, for example, a perfect example, I've worked with the Potbellies. So you remember that Jeep commercial? Don't hold back.
Everyone in Australia does, or should.
I've worked with those guys. Pardon me. I've worked with those guys on a couple of their newer singles, just helping out with the co-production and everything like that. And like, you know, that's something that I never ever would have imagined doing, you know, 5 or 10 years ago. And like, it just shows how far the production side of things can get you comparatively to the DJing side. And fair enough, there are a lot of really, really creative DJs, and I do admit that. But on my side, I'm much more of the technical kind of sound design and music composition side of things. So
yeah, DJ seems to me now to be the DJing side of it is like the surface level kind of that's where that stands, and then beneath
performance
that,
element,
the depth is in the production, which is what you mainly
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's go back in time. What kind of kid were you? What kind of kid were you at school? At home?
That's an interesting question, and I think you know the answer to that pretty well.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
You've known me for such a long time. You've probably seen like a huge change. Like I used to always be the kid that wasn't necessarily the friends of most of the people. You know, I was always kind of like flamboyant, outgoing, probably somewhat attention deficit.
I remember you had a lot of energy on the paddock.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I always had a lot of energy. Was always running around, getting in trouble in class. You know, the typical me as a kid. But you know, I always had a fascination with computers. My grandfather, he built computers, and from a extremely young age, like 6, 7, 8 years old, I had access to like really like the great computers of the last few years. So I had access to some really good hardware, whereas, you know, a lot of other people at that age bracket, you know, they're not thinking about using the computer, or, you know, unless it's for school or whatever. You know, they didn't have a rig set up at their house and all that kind of thing. And I remember the dial-up days, like, you know, I had access to all of that so much earlier than a lot of people. And literally from those early days, you know, I just kept going into stuff like that. You know, I was into gaming from a very early age. I never had really an Xbox or a PlayStation. It was always computer gaming. So, you know, that kind of brought my journey into music through experimenting through like earlier production softwares like Sony Acid Pro and, you know, different really, really early softwares. And that kind of led the way and paved the way for me coming into high school, and then actually turning it into a not quite a serious thing yet, but a much more serious kind of thing compared to how it was. It was kind of just an experiment from the very beginning. And then as I kind of came into high school, it became a lot more, can't really think of the word, like it became a big part of my life. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Always.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
So no, I was just going to say, always, the kind of very outgoing kid, but sort of a bit too outgoing at the same time. So like maybe a bit crazy, some could say, but at the same time, like, you know, a lot has changed since I was a kid. A lot has changed in my life. A lot has changed in everybody's lives. And yeah, for the better. So.
And going back on what you were saying there with the software that you were first introduced to, what even inspired you to even experiment with that in the first place? Was there something environmental that was a factor? More so than just the hardware access?
Not really. Like, to be honest, it was just a thing that happened. I was so young and didn't really understand it, and it just grew into something that I never would have imagined from such a young age. I think my grandfather was always a big software guy. He was always a big introducing me to like you know, computer software, computer hardware, all that kind of thing. And I think just his influence kind of got me experimenting into it. And I guess, you could say my mum's a singer. So I probably subconsciously took her entertainment, pathway from a young age, hearing her sing, watching her perform and all that kind of thing. And that's probably also had a subconscious impact on that as well. And, she's still singing. She's almost 60 and she's still singing. And like, I think without her support as well, like I definitely wouldn't be where I am today. That's for sure.
That's awesome. And I'm glad to hear she's still doing it. I still recall back in the day when she was a singer.
Yeah.
And no, I remember going to your house at one point, and I think it was like celebrations or something. Like there was some song that there was a particular song that she sang for us or sang for the school or something like that. And I can't remember what exact song it was. I'm pretty sure it was that one that goes like celebrate. Good, that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's amazing. So your parents have been really supportive in this process?
Yeah. They've always been very supportive. And they've always kind of, I think the thing that's important as well for a lot of parents is they kind of shelter their kids from what they really want to do. A lot of people I know, they sort of, it was always maths and it was economics and it was always, it was like, study these things, be smart, and, you'll succeed kind of thing. And then, for me, it was always, do what you want to do. Just put your best effort in, and it paid off at the end of the day. I got a great ATAR, I got a great, I got into university, did a university degree, and now I'm graduated as a bachelor, and it was always just do your best, and just we're not going to pressure you to do what you don't want to do, because I was the first in my family to finish the HSC, so it was kind of an important thing for me to show everyone in my family that I wasn't, just a musician kid. I was actually, a bit of a smart cookie, and I could actually apply my knowledge and go to uni and actually do the uni course as well and complete it and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So university was something you did genuinely want to do, because I can imagine there's people out there who start, getting a taste for the music scene, and they think this is my way out, this is my excuse, or this is my, not so much an excuse, but it's what they want to, it might be what they want to do, but they say I can rely on this and not get the that education at university. I imagine there's some people who think like that, but it's amazing that you still went and completed the degree. Did you do that because you just genuinely wanted to do that for yourself?
Well, basically, it's an interesting kind of thing to look at, because I never wanted to go to uni. I just wanted to finish the HSC and just go straight into music. But after actually, there was one day that I remember really particularly. I was sitting in my science class, and the school handed out forms, and you had to go, am I receiving an ATAR or am I not receiving an ATAR? Do you remember that? Did they do that at your school?
Oh, I can't recall, but I know that's part of the process.
I remember thinking, like, you know what, I'll just do the ATAR. Ended up smashing the ATAR, and I was like, wow, okay, university. But at the same time, from that point, I wanted to apply myself. I never thought I had the the knowledge to do that. To get such a good ATAR and to go into university. But it turns out, if you apply yourself in the right areas, you can achieve well, and you can achieve to a good level. So yeah, that was like, it was kind of a blessing in disguise now that I think about it, because it's opened up so many pathways and so many connections to the real world as well. Particularly just with university and all the people I've met through university, and all the lecturers that I've met who I've also met, other artists. And, I'm still connected with all the artists that I was working with in uni as well, which is so cool.
Yeah, so I imagine there's that important social aspect to still going to uni, even if you think it's viable just to do music. Yeah, for sure. So take us back to kind of, I guess, would it be the end of high school? When did you start really, when you said it became real, like what did that kind of look like for you in terms of what were you actually doing to advance yourself in music?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say it became real in late year 11. And then start of year 12, because that's when my music was reaching big audiences. That's when YouTube was getting popping. Starting, everyone had access to it. Everyone was, doing that kind of thing. I used to post mashups and stuff. So I used to be the DJ until I started producing music well enough to make proper releases and kind of things like that. So year 11 and 12, I was kind of building a hype. In the school, I was known as like the DJ, the guy like who does the DJing, but it's actually known for it. A funny thing was, I was voted most likely to become famous in high school, and I was just like, oh my god,
living it out.
Like you can imagine like the weird awkward kid that's just like super attention deficit, just like got voted like most likely to become like famous, and you're like, what? And then as
they called it.
Yeah. So yeah, I left school. I actually did IT for a year. So I did web system administration, and just did that for a year to see how it was. And I didn't like the 9 to 5, and that was kind of an early decider of, I was like, it's good work and it pays well, but at the same time, I'd rather do something creative, and I'd rather do something that I can sort of just freestyle and just do my thing. So yeah, as I started entering uni, my music started to become more and more popular. I started playing shows more. I started to play more clubs and stuff in Sydney. And mind you, during high school, I was still playing. Like I was playing the Ranch. I was playing at the Epping Hotel, and like technically that's kind of probably where the journey really started. But it wasn't until about the second or third year in uni that things started really popping, because that's when, I think that's probably around when Spotify started. And when Spotify started, everything just exploded. Because, I started touring overseas. I started, my first overseas show was actually in Belgium. And I played a music festival in Belgium before I played one in Australia, which I find pretty weird. But that's kind of when things started becoming really serious. And then once I started traveling to Europe regularly, then things just exploded really, because the connections, the people that you're working with, the record labels that you're working with as well, walk into a record label, like, holy shit, he's actually here. That's when things started really getting insane. But that kind of wasn't until I finished university, because you're still tied to uni. You've got to go to uni. You've got to attend your classes. So once I finished uni, I started going overseas regularly, started going to Holland, started going around. And then, just more shows, more gigs, and more music really after that. And now with like the new releases, like the plays are just phenomenal. And it's kind of actually pretty interesting, like now, to see how far things have come in just a few years with like Spotify. YouTube streaming's gone up tenfold. iTunes streaming as well. There's so many different, we call them, like, so we have a distributor, and then you have platforms that you release on. So there's so many platforms that people listen to across the world. And like now your music can be exposed to like hundreds of millions, even billions of people. And just that expansiveness is just like insane, like for anyone who's kind of getting into it. So yeah.
So it sounds like for people who are interested in getting into this kind of industry, that there's far less barriers to entry as well. Like you can publish more music at a cheaper cost as well, it seems.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So you basically can hire a distributor and they'll do all the work for you. If you get an artwork and the song ready, you can just submit it, and then it will get submitted to 60 different platforms where people can listen to your music. In saying that though, it is kind of hard to get an initial ground up. So from the very, very beginning, your marketing kind of you have to plan your marketing, you have to plan your journey, because it is very difficult to make that first 1,000 or so real followers, because people if they're not familiar with your name or your brand, they're kind of less inclined to click listen, or less inclined to actually support your music. So it is a very difficult thing, because, people have their favorite artists. They have people who they listen to all the time, and then, you're trying to promote your sound and stuff like that, and it might be very difficult for you in the early stages. But at the same time, the access to the software, the access to the hardware and stuff like that now is just so readily available. Tutorials, everything is so available on different platforms now. So I think, yeah, definitely a great time to get into it.
What's your advice on breaking through that first barrier? Because it sounds like, and it makes sense, that if I'm someone who listens to 5 DJs routinely, you're really relying on me just by coincidence, almost just clicking some random song that pops up, and then I like the sound of this, and then you start resonating with that sound, and you stick to that brand. So what are some ways of kind of helping yourself through that barrier?
There's a few things, and it's kind of what I did 3 or 4 years ago. I started once I started associating with global artists is when I became a global artist. So I started releasing remixes and stuff like that. They got supported by like Oliver Heldens and Don Diablo. So then I reached out and I said, hey, look, I've got some music. Would you be interested in signing it? Would you be interested in working with this? And it was always kind of, but it had to be the right track. But once that happened, once the association started to come together with all these global artists, then that kind of brought my brand up to much more of an international level. And artist association, collaborating with different artists, collaborating with vocalists, you're reaching their fan bases as well as your own. And at some point, a collaboration that you make with someone can become a world-renowned song. For example, my track with Luciana, which was a #1 Billboard chart. I never thought for a second that it would be a #1, but it was just a track we did together. We wanted to boost both of our names. She loved what I did. I loved what she did. And it just happened. And then from then on, everything's just like spiraling upwards. And, there are other things you can do as well. In Spotify, like if you can get your music onto big playlists, there's some playlists have millions of people who follow them. You can get yourself on one playlist. That's 1 million potential people who have now listened to your music. And, get yourself in YouTube playlists, get yourself featured in a YouTube video from some other artist, get a video, start making video breakdowns of how you do things. Like there's a lot of ways that you can do it, but I'm not saying it's easy by any sort of stretch of the imagination. It does take time. It takes professionalism. It takes effort and consistency as well. But those are some things that anyone can kind of do eventually once they're connected with the right people.
Yeah, I love that. So it seems like remixes is where it actually started. We were talking about mashups and remixes.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing some of your remixes. That's how I started. I think the way I heard about you, it's funny. The first time someone told me, it's like, Tom Budin's playing at, it was Epping Hotel, as you said, where the journey started. It did. I started to hear, people started to get in my ear and they're like, he's a really good DJ and he's getting bigger. And I was like, this is crazy. And then I kept hearing that. I never saw you myself at that particular venue, but people started linking me your remixes. It might have been my brother who was like, dude, listen to this remix. And I listened to it and it was like incredible. I can't remember, was it an Ed Sheeran or it was something.
There was an Ed Sheeran one. Yeah.
Something like that.
There was a lot of remixes. What I started to do was I was remixing popular tracks at the time, and then people would always be looking for the house remix, the newest house remix, the newest club remix. And if I was putting a remix out within a month, then people would automatically be traveling over to my music, and that's the thing. That's where your brother probably would have heard my music, and stuff like that. And I'm sure he would have been onto it back in the day if he'd already known my music. But he would have gone, "Oh, this is brand new," And then it's sort of that kind of word of mouth stuff as well is like a good thing to have, because you start building that kind of hype behind everything as well.
Yeah, so it seems like for DJs who are trying to, or someone who's trying to even get into music production, someone who wants to get their name a bit bigger, a good place to start is to remix popular tracks to create their own little spin on it. It's a nice entry point, and then you can get some exposure. And it sounds like that led on to all these collaborations and opportunities to actually create this exponential growth for you.
Exactly right. And the thing is as well, if you're remixing the top tracks, the top DJs are always looking for those tracks and those remixes, because they need to run podcasts, they need to run mixes, they need to play shows. And if your mixes are good enough, you know, they can make it onto the main stage of a music festival before you've even, you know, like that happened to me a few years ago at EDC, and I was like, holy, you know, like I never thought this would even happen. And then after that, you know, I actually played a gig in the USA because people said, oh yeah, we heard Dylan Francis play your song, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, oh, that's so good. And we've been listening to you at our sorority and like, for like, since we started university. And then I ended up playing a DJ set at a chapter house in the upstate of New York. And just things like that, like just that you never expect to happen. And, you know, that's the same thing as well. They were all telling me, you know, they listened to my remixes from the start. That's how they knew my music. And then they started, you know, listening to my originals as they came out. And as things kind of became bigger, you know, they were also listening at that time. So it's always crazy to see that as well, and how much my music can influence a group of people as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw, because I remember seeing you get featured on, was it like Hell Deep Radio or like Oliver Heldens? You know,
that was the first that was the first really big one. Hell Deep Radio. That's kind of what the big thing was that brought my name into the spotlight. And then from then, you know, that's where I could then start approaching different labels, start approaching different publishing agencies and stuff like that. Because it was that whole association thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, you build this kind of CV almost, and you know, the more times you get featured, the more reputable you are, and then more opportunities come your way.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm interested, are there any particular, you know, musicians out there, DJs, producers, who you view as kind of an idol or someone you aspire to be like? Or does that change over time?
My answer to this is always kind of the same, actually, because it's one particular one that's always, he's been in the game for so long. Well, there's a couple, but Calvin Harris, he's been that dude that I've always I've listened to since I began my journey, and I still listen to his music now. And he just does it. He just executes the simple pop music artist, but he just does everything. He did an interview, and he explained how he makes a track. He's like, oh, there's 5 parts of the track: a piano, a bass line, a vocal, some you know, like some keys and like this. And then the way I started thinking about music instantly after that, I was like, it doesn't have to be overcomplicatedly, amazingly insane. You know, it can just be simple. And I've always looked at his music as being so detailed but so simple. And I think, like, yeah, I've always thought Calvin Harris, you know, there's Diplo and Dylan Francis, kind of those older guys, they've just had that market from the very beginning. And it's always something that I've always kind of followed suit and tried to, you know, take inspiration from as well. So yeah.
Have you met Calvin Harris?
I have not met Calvin Harris, no, but I've met a few.
Need to get that collaboration happening.
Surrounding artists, yeah, I would love. That would be absolutely insane. That would be insane. I haven't met Calvin Harris, but I've met a bunch of pretty insane DJs. You know, like I've met Oliver Heldens, and I've met you know, like Showtech. I've met Don Diablo. I've met you know, I've met Dead Mouse, and like, you know, pretty insane.
Luke as well, haven't you?
Oh yeah. Funny thing is, I've actually met Laid Back Luke, you know, probably 5 or 6 plus times now, and like every time I see him, it's always the same story. Hey, how you going? I'm here in Sydney for one day. I got to go back to the US the next day. It's insane. It's insane seeing the lifestyle of those artists too. He operates in US time as well. So he goes to bed at like 3 p.m. Australian, and then wakes up at like 2 a.m., you know, like, so he stays in the same time. It's insane. It's insane. But yeah. I would love to meet Calvin Harris just because he just seems like a nice guy. You know, like he just seems like a down to earth, nice dude. And yeah, I've always been a big fan of his music. So yeah.
Yeah, my personal favorite, like from early on as a DJ, was actually always Avicii. And I was interested if he was someone you looked up to, because I know for me, when I like think about house music and where it kind of really changed and evolved at such a dramatic rate, where suddenly house was getting played on the radio and stuff, it was like through Avicii almost, is the way I saw it. I could be off on that, but that was kind of the impact he seemed to have. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think so. It's interesting you mentioned that because, you know, his recent death, you know, was a massive hit to the electronic music industry. And I think Avicii was one of the key players who brought EDM to so many people. Like, EDM was big, but Avicii connected country music with EDM. He connected, you know, electronic dance music with like billions and billions of people. You know, there were hundreds of thousands of people that he'd stand in front of who absolutely adored his music. And, you know, that's something that you have to be such a global icon to achieve. You know, he went from a zero to hero within 5 years, and it's unbelievable to see. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I particularly have never been too fond of Avicii myself. I appreciate his production. I appreciate the quality of his work and everything like that. It's just not really my style. It's a bit more progressive, a bit more kind of lighthearted than a lot of the stuff I've been kind of doing and listening to. But at the same time, like, he's been a massive inspiration for a lot of people. So I think, you know, that's why there was such a massive kind of impact of his passing on the industry, because, you know, now such a large icon who's connected so many people together is now kind of gone. And, you know, the same goes for people like Mac Miller as well. You know, think about like Mac Miller passing away. You know, there'd be just as many people listening to him as there would be with Avicii and everything as well. So very sad, and that's why we all need to look after ourselves at the end of the day. So
yeah, that's right. And something I noticed I watched that Avicii documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
And something kind of profound, and I think kind of what was the theme of it, was that the lifestyle and like the performance side of things is not always how it's cracked out to be. And it's not the way that people think about it. And it doesn't seem like it sounds like you're touring around, but when you just contrasted yourself to kind of the laid back Luke approach, where it's just come in for 24 hours, crazy touring. Correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't seem like you're quite you have that drastic kind of those drastic shifts in your lifestyle all the time, where you're just performing constantly. But what are your thoughts on that lifestyle? Is that something that you think you will take on as you become bigger? What's your approach on that lifestyle in general in terms of touring and whatnot?
I've been in negotiations now already. That lifestyle is going to probably happen at the end of the year for me. I'm doing an Asia tour, and I got 6 countries in 6 days or something.
Wow.
So like, you know, it's something that everyone's going to eventually have to do if you get to a level where that demand is there. But I think the importance is everyone can do it, but only for so long. You know, taking breaks, you know, doing sober gigs, particularly is a big one. You know, I've been to so many gigs where people are like, have a drink, have this, have that. And, you know, they're not realizing that it's actually, it's your job, and it's like so readily available, and like it's so easy to access things that you need and all that kind of thing. So it's just important I think the laid back Luke approach is the right approach, because he's not drinking. He's doing karate. He does karate outside of his job. He does, you know, yoga and calisthenics. He's just a super healthy dude. And I think you need to adapt that lifestyle, because it's very easy to fall into it, you know, and it's very easy to use your job as a way of hiding an addiction or a sickness, you know, and it's just important to have breaks, and you know, if you're being overworked, tell someone that you're being overworked, and that you know, don't let people own you, because at the end of the day, you own yourself, and people, they think they own you, but realistically, you know, they're just working for you, you know. So you always got to kind of keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of there's a misconception out there that all DJs or even producers who are on tour and performing, you know, must be, you know, always drinking tons or on drugs, etc. But you hear of people like you just said, like by Luke, and there's also, I think, like Steve Aoki. I've heard he's completely sober, and I know he's a bit of a health nut as well. That seems to be a potential misconception out there about some of these bigger producers and DJs.
Definitely, yeah. I think from my personal experience, I think a lot of those artists, not all of them, or probably any of them really, this is more speculation, but I think sometimes you have points where you get to and you go, holy shit, this isn't what I'm, I shouldn't be doing this. And it's kind of a decider. I go to a few gigs sober now just because like it's just easier just to run in, run out kind of thing. You're not focused on getting drunk. You're not focused on really, doing anything naughty. You're just going in. It's your job, and then you leave. You can drive home. You don't have to catch an Uber and spend all your money. So it's just kind of.
It's important to separate the professional side of things from that lifestyle that you could fall into.
Exactly right. And especially, when you get to a level as well, there's a certain sense of professionalism that you have to uphold as well. And that's what I've been learning as well. It's like, you can't just be an idiot, because you can ruin relationships in a few seconds, and you can potentially jeopardize your career in a few seconds as well if you do something silly as a few artists. I've heard some funny stories. But I won't go into them because they're pretty bad. But like career ruining stuff that you just don't realize because you're so smashed. So yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, to the extent that you have already toured, because it sounds like you've already done a few trips. You've been to America. Mm-hmm. You've done Europe as well. I saw you doing like a big thing in Germany. Was it recently?
Yeah.
Tell us what it's like to actually tour. What's the day-to-day like, and any funny, crazy stories out there for you? Not ones that honestly bring down your career though.
So I've got the local touring side of things pretty under wraps. I do a gig every couple of weeks or whatever, but Australia's clubbing scene is just nothing compared to the rest of the world. So about 8 to 10 weeks a year I just go overseas, and I use that time to kind of liaise with the right people and all that kind of thing. So I go to Europe. I usually fly into Holland, the middle of summer, because it's kind of not too, it's hot, but then it kind of cools down towards the end of my trip, and then I can have a bit of winter in there as well, because we're in a different weather cycle, like in Australia compared to them. So I go over there. Like last year, for example, I went to Holland. I went around to France. I went to Germany. I went to Prague. I didn't play any shows really in Germany or Prague, but I played a bunch of shows in Holland. So I played at Bitterzoot in Holland. I played for the Hexagon party at NYX. I played a bunch of gigs. I didn't do that many festivals last year. This year was supposed to be the year of the festivals for me, because that's when all the you've been seeing the releases coming out. It was supposed to be in a perfect perfect synchronization with all the clubs and stuff like that. But I've played in Belgium a few times, but it's more of a yearly thing that I come back for, Walhalla Festival. One of my friends, Michael Amani, runs. He used to do all the lead stuff for that festival as well with his friends, and they used to put on the music festival. But of course, coronavirus has kind of changed things a little bit. But yeah, honestly, I think I haven't been too insane on the whole touring side of things just yet, because visas are a very complicated thing, and you have to basically prove that you are of some notoriety before you come to the country, and then it's always a 6 month to 1 year venture before you even get any of the papers where you can even go overseas. So I've kind of had to keep things under wraps for a little while, and we're planning on doing everything massively this year and the next year. But obviously coronavirus has come around, so it's not the best thing ever. But towards the end of the year, I'll be teeing it up in Asia, in Singapore, in Bali, in potentially in China as well, depending on how the global climate looks at that time. And there's a lot of opportunity there now with all the releases that are coming out and everything, but they still have I still have to work on the kind of touring side over the next 6 to 12 months.
Why do you think Australia or performing in Australia is so different to Europe?
There's just not the numbers aren't the same, basically. So, you know, you've got Australia's population in a country the size of New South Wales. You know, like it's absolutely insane when you think about that. You know, there's 26 million people in Australia, and then, you know, there can be 26 million people in one city somewhere else in the world. And, you know, Australia, I feel, don't have resources that are really given to the industry here. Whereas, like, in other places, you know, they can run festivals of 200, 300,000 people in one day. You know, whereas, Stereo Sonic Festival, our biggest festival, was only 30,000 people. So yeah, so like 30 or so thousand people shows is nothing compared to like 200,000 people at one stage of a music festival. You're like, you know, it's just insane. Our clubs are very small. We've had lockout laws for a long time, so lockout laws have heavily impacted all the industry. You know, all the gigs that we used to have. You know, Ivy's now a completely different ownership. You know, Candy's has just closed their doors. World Bar is now closed. Soho's closed. Star, I won't say the rest of that word. That's closed. You know, they're building 2 new casinos, which don't really seem to have any live music venues or anything like that. You know, so it's a complicated scene in Australia, and in Europe. You know, people start going out at 12 a.m. and they get home 3 p.m. the next day, whereas in Australia you're in bed by 2 a.m. You know, you're out by 7, you're in bed by 2, just because everyone's accustomed to all the rules and the laws that we have. So it definitely impacts the music, the performance industry in that sense.
Yeah. So more on your, going back to your music specifically, how is your, it's something, because I've heard you say this as well, or talk about it, that, you know, the sound of your music is something that people can become boxed in by or constrained by. And it's something that you don't want that to happen to you. Again, not trying to put words in your mouth. I heard you say this.
Yeah.
Video, and I found that interesting. And you speak about like how DJs or musicians rather develop a sound, and then the importance of evolving and branching out, or the importance at least for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. Like definitely. It's an interesting point because for me, I've always been interested in various types of music. My influences always come from hard dance music, you know, upwards of 140, 150, 160 BPM, like even up to 200 BPM. And listening to that as like a 7-year-old kid, you know, it hasn't...
Can you explain what BPM is to people out there who don't know what that means?
It's basically how many beats per minute is in the track. So if there's 160 BPM, then there'd be 160 beats per bar. Sorry, not per bar. There'd be 160 beats, 4 beats within each bar per minute. Wow, this is complicated.
So it's basically really crazy fast music. It's a measure of speed.
Yeah, basically it's just super fast music. Yes,
okay.
Correct. It's like insane music. Like if you look it up, it's just like hardcore music. But yeah, so my music from the early days was always very, very hyper. Like, so coming back now where I'm making such calm, you know, arguably calm kind of like pop music, you know. I have a bunch of different aliases that I do work under, and I also like with my main alias to keep it along the same lines, keep it in a similar kind of tempo, except, you know, feel free to experiment with different sounds as well, and kind of broaden my horizons. I've been doing that particularly through collaboration, so working with different artists that I really like, and we try and make something together that reflects both of our sounds. So there is a freedom there to work in kind of multiple different areas, except you're still pushing kind of a main brand. You're kind of focusing the brand, you know, on yourself and the development of kind of your brand and everything like that. Except, you know, there's influences that can come from different places, and there's also an ability for you to kind of be original in that sense as well. You know, there are artists like Diplo, there are artists like Dylan Francis. You know, for example, Diplo is a perfect example. He has a reggae alias, and then he produces pop music, and he's also produced like Mumbaton music in the same alias as well. And he's also then you know, he's got a house anthem on my mind, which is like 130 BPM, 128 BPM. So he's bouncing all over the place as well, except he's got millions and millions of fans across the world who love everything that he produces. And that's the kind of brand that I want to build. So a brand that I can just release whatever feels good at the time, and people will be receptive of that, whether it be positive or negative. You know, negative reception is not necessarily a bad thing, because, you know, it always leaves room for feedback. It leaves room for people to help you in your development as well, but also positive as well. You know, seeing people react to my music that I never would have expected is also a really big one. So, yeah. Yeah,
that's awesome. How do you think music has actually helped you grow on a kind of deeper personal level? Because you mentioned that, you know, when you see each other, we've changed over the years, but I feel like the change is far more than just physical. For you, there's been something much deeper that's happened, and perhaps music has played a pivotal role in that.
Yeah, well, I'll kind of speak about it briefly, but I've kind of thought about that a few times, and I think music has taught me most particularly to look into the future and to analyze trends. So to be a successful musician, you have to know trends, and you have to know the future, and you have to know the past. You have to know what's happened. You know, you have to be aware of where you are, and then you have to know what's going to happen in the future. Where's the music industry going in the future? What are people going to be listening to? How are they going to be listening? You know, that's the kind of thing that I also apply now, you know, to sort of like finance and investments and things like that, you know, where I never would have considered as a kid, you know, thinking about like what's happened in the past with, you know, things like investment properties, all that kind of thing. Like, where's the market going, and what will it be doing in the future? You know, back in the future, I was always present, Tom, but now I have a lot of outlook on the past and the future as well. So I think that's a huge thing that I've kind of adapted and adopted, you know, growing as a musician as well. So yeah, very brief thing, but a very, very impactful thing for someone, you know, particularly our age, who's kind of wanting to get into different, you know, avenues and stuff like that. So
yeah, and has music done? I mean, I suppose there seems to be this kind of spiritual element as well to music, that what it does for people. Have you felt that? Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Definitely, man. I feel an interesting one is actually when you connect with people in smaller crowds. It's actually harder to make people interested in a smaller environment than it is for you to make people interested in a larger environment, because people bounce off each other. So if you're playing in a club of 50 people, it's a lot harder to get people's attention, because they have more attention on themselves. So like, if you're in a larger environment, then it's definitely kind of a lot easier in that sense. So yeah, I think like it's just that the whole spiritual side of things, like, is like, it just, there's no other feeling, there's no other emotion that like you can't explain it. It's just the way that you connect with people through your music, like, and you see people's reactions. That's the whole spiritual side of things, and it helps you to understand yourself, particularly in environments of other people and stuff like that, where it be like intensity or, you know, your own personality and stuff like that. But I think, yeah, the spiritual side of things is like, once you produce a song and you play it to a bunch of people, and you play it to a party, and the whole party just loses their minds, like, there's no other real way to, like, yeah, to know it, basically, like to understand it, really.
Yeah, it sounds like there's an element of like euphoria to it, especially seeing that final product of a long creative process.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
I think something that might benefit anyone out there who's also kind of interested in getting into the industry, any DJs out there, or people who are already kind of on their way. What's the framework through which or with which you approach your music production? Is when you come to produce a new song, whether it's collaborative or just your own, because I know you've done a lot of just your own stuff as well. Do you follow? Are there particular steps? Is there a formula that you follow in a very broad sense that could be useful?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So it depends on the type of music you make. But realistically, what I'll generally do is I'll start with a set of chords. So I'll begin with a set of chords. Then I'll write some drums. And then once I've written the drums and the chords, then I can start to build the structure of the track. I kind of break it down into sections. So sometimes I'll start with drums. Sometimes I'll start with a vocal and then write the song to the vocal. But it's all kind of a formula. Yeah, so exactly what you're saying. I find find the key that you want to work with first. If you're a singer-songwriter, find your key where you don't have to strain yourself. And then that will always give you a root note that you can revolve your productions around. And that's kind of the, trying to find that beginning note, trying to find the vibe that you're going for is quite difficult unless you have kind of a set of notes in place that you want to work. So I find that, just starting with the simple things first, a chord progression or a set of drums or something to inspire you, whether it be a sample loop or something from a different pack or, anything that you can get just to start writing the first initial elements. Don't be afraid to experiment with sound, with time stretching and all that kind of thing, because, you'll come up with some extremely interesting results and things, like you wouldn't ordinarily kind of put together can sound really, really crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it'll be super helpful for people out there trying to get into the production side of it. I've got a couple of last things if you've got time.
Yeah, sure.
I'm interested in terms of, well, I'll frame the question this way. How does Tom Budin become Calvin Harris? How do you go from where you are now to that level of kind of notoriety? Like and also connected to that, I'm interested, how do you get yourself on the Tomorrowland main stage? Put it that way.
It's a combination of several things. One being consistent music releases, two being, PR and promotions. That's a big one. Artist association, branding association, record label association, and publishing particularly. So basically, you can't, I would say 95 to probably a higher even percentage, 96, 97% of people won't be able to just get on the main stage unless they either have a connection in the industry, they know somebody, they have some cousin who owns Tomorrowland or something like that. If you're in that 3% of people or whatever who do have that, then you've got an in there. But for the other 99, however many percent of people, I'm too early.
I fried your brain from this conversation.
Yeah. For the average people, it's you got to release a massive tune, like a huge, like billions of streams, and then that will create the demand. And you also have to plan things like a year in advance. Like all the festivals, they're planning a year in advance, and this comes to the whole future, past, present kind of thing as well. It's like they're planning you in a year's time, and people have no idea that you're going to play there in a year's time. And then you've got to maintain a massive schedule of releases, consistent remixes, associative works, collaborations with big artists. I think one of the keys for me to get to that level as well is a collaboration with a Calvin Harris. Once you're on the stage with these people begin to see your personality. You begin to shake hands with the guy, the stage manager of Tomorrowland, the lighting guy for this company in Holland. Once you start shaking hands with these people start waking up, and then they start connecting the dots, and you can eventually start putting yourself on those stages and all that kind of thing. But it does require a very strong management group and a strong group of people around you as well to push that brand, because just as one person, it's extremely difficult to push yourself to that level, especially on the funding side of things as well. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because I feel like there's potentially a misconception out there as well, or something that, at least I had this view that, like, as if you were that good at DJing, or if you were that good at producer, you would naturally be, if you're in the top 10 DJs, you would be on the top 10, you know, in the list of people who are playing at the world's biggest festivals. But it just doesn't work like that. It seems.
Yeah, for sure.
All these other.
Well, it's just because there are just so many people doing it, and you really just have to be exceptionally exceptional to be able to get to that level. That's kind of as simply as it is.
And for you, what's the key to that? Like, what's the key to standing out?
I think the key to standing out is just being yourself, but being a likable character, likable enough that people can connect with you easily, you know, and also releasing music of a very high quality, and just releasing music that connects with people on an emotional level, realistically, you know. Like, it's kind of hard to explain because everyone has a different approach. You know, I have a very kind of like happy, kind of vibrant approach to it. Other people have a very dark and sinister approach to it, and that's what works for them. You know, that's the crowd that they're appealing to. And, you know, for me, it's always been like, a very emotional thing. And like, I've always tried to keep my music very upbeat and very relatable for people, especially lyrics wise. I like to keep my lyrics very relatable because, you know, if it's relatable, people will sing it, they'll remember it. And how memorable your tracks are is also a big thing as well. So, yeah. Yeah.
And in terms of, you've mentioned management and record labels. I was actually curious because I don't know anything about this. What's it like? You've said the importance of having a good and strong management team in terms of getting yourself to these next levels. In terms of record labels and that, like, how did you first go about structuring those deals, or rather, how did your management or your team go about it? Like, how does that work for a musician, and how do you make income that is fair for you as the actual musician from these deals? Because I imagine are they taking a cut, for instance, a lot of these people you're partnering up with?
Yeah, so they generally, record labels, they'll take a pretty big cut of what you're doing, but generally speaking, nowadays a lot of the money is made from touring, so you get recurring royalties, except that's only if you're making millions and millions of streams. So basically, back in the day when I was in the initial stages of connecting up with these things, it was first artist association, then it was an artist reaching out to me, hey, I'm working for this label, I do my label, which is the sub-label of like a global label, and then they signed me up, and then that was my connection, because you're liaising then with all the CEOs of all the big labels and stuff like that. And then from then on, you can start reaching out. You can have your management group go, hey, we've got more music. Then we put it on the main label. And that's your initial connection with them. And then it kind of spirals, you know, because then you have different record labels who are approaching you. And as you work with different artists, they're signed to different labels. So, I worked through Armada with Jack Wilby, and I had a really successful track with him called Price on Love. And that was just by chance because he was signed to them. He was signed to them at the time. And he put me in contact with them, and then everything just kind of connections and just reaching out to more people, and trying to just reach out to people, even if you don't think you can, reach out anyway, And there's always some potential of you hitting the right person, striking the right chord with someone. They like your personality, they've heard your music before, and that's the thing. That's why the management comes in really well, because the management can be there to reach out and to talk with people and negotiate percentages and all that kind of thing as well. So,
yeah. Okay. So I wanted to kind of wrap up with two last questions. And the first one is, I was listening to some of your tracks last night, actually, and just going over it and getting the feel for it again, because I really love some of them. In the song Shake That, is that you doing the vocals?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to confirm, because when I first heard it, I'm like, this really sounds like Tom, because I know you've had other people do vocals, but I'm like, this sounds like a distorted version of your voice.
Well, it's actually my voice. You remember Mike Baird?
Yeah.
That's my voice.
A track on that, and you did one on Gladys as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's all my voice. Most of that stuff, because you don't have to pay royalties to anyone for their voice. You can just you're already sharing your royalties with the label, sharing with another person's halving that as well. So if you're only getting 20% of the royalties or 20 to 30% of the gross net royalties out of every stream that you get, and then you're halving that again, you're not getting a lot of money. Like, and that's just the sad reality of it. But that's where like you push the production side of things, and you know, you push the touring side alongside, and you can make some good bank as well. So
yeah, well, I think they worked well with that one. What's in store for you? You've mentioned you got a tour at the end of the year, which hopefully, I hope for your sake, is not disrupted by the COVID thing. Which I feel like, are you worried that might unsettle that? Will that just get postponed?
Well,
worst case.
Look, my whole Europe trip this year was completely thrown into the garbage bin. So like I've already faced the, you know, the reality of the situation anyway. Now, like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, then I just got to wait another year, and we'll just plan it for the next year. As unfortunate as it is, you know, it's gonna have to happen anyway. My management's got great relationships with people overseas. You know, we're developing all of our relationships, so that there should be, you know, great opportunity to be able to do it anyway. But yeah, so eventually down the track, so I've got more releases planned for this for the middle of the year. I got an official remix for Lost Frequencies, which is massive. I've got an official remix for another artist. I've got two more releases coming as well, which are a bit more clubby. And then that'll hopefully lead into kind of when Australia's coming. But once we get hopefully back into clubbing within the next, you know, 6 months or so, you know, I'll be able to start playing out those tracks, building out the hype. Then I'll probably travel through Asia, do all these gigs in Asia at the end of the year, and then head from Asia to Europe again at the start of the year, and then continue on. But it all depends on the whole COVID situation. So it's always kind of hard to speculate when you know that there's just so much stuff happening right now, especially for a lot of people, you know, working at home and everything like that. So,
yeah, I suppose the only kind of upside, if it is one, is that you have more time to spend on producing.
Definitely, man. Heaps of time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, man, dude, this has been amazing. Thank you for all the insights.
No worries.
And it's been fun chatting about it all.
Yeah, no worries.
Good luck. I hope the you know, the industry isn't too affected in the longer term by the whole coronavirus situation. But I think you've done amazing things so far in your career, and I think you're just only going to go up from here. How do people get? What's the best platform for people to go to? Is it just Tom Budin? Is that the best way to find you on Spotify?
Just Google my name. If you Google my name, literally, it will come up with everything you can possibly imagine. You know, like, so yeah. Spotify is where I'm releasing most of my stuff and focusing most of my releases in now, just because it's just so globally accessible for a lot of people. I'm doing a lot of YouTube videos now. You can literally, if you just search my name, Tom Budin Music, whatever, on YouTube, you know, it'll come up with tutorials and videos and mixes that I've done. Some mixes that I've just posted with brand new music, like unreleased stuff. And yeah, basically just Google it and just look for me on different websites, and you'll definitely find me. Yeah.
All right, everyone out there, add Tom Budin to your Spotify playlist. And until next time, Tom, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No worries at all, man. Thank you very much.